Hello and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that's probably wrong, but fun to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm Leslie.
And I'm Shauna.
Today we are bringing you a long-awaited deep dive into one of the new commander decks for Zendikar Rising, the Lands Matter deck that's coming out, and we are super excited about it. We've spent some time going through the cards, and basically what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about each of the cards, where they fit. We're going to talk to you about what this deck is supposed to do, and then towards the end, if you're still with us, we have some tweaks and things that we think might make this deck even better if you do decide to pick it up at one of your local game stores when it comes out. So without further ado, Shauna, why don't you tell us a little bit about what this deck is meant to do and who our commander is?
Yeah, this deck is meant to make some really big dudes, elemental dudes, some with counters, like +1 counters on them, and just get in there and benefit from landfall wherever you can, just to make your guys even bigger, more counters, more just running people over. Run them over with big monsters from land. It's awesome. Obun Moldaya Ancestor is the commander for 1, a red, a green, and a white. So these are colors that Leslie and I love to play. And he is a 3/3, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is Obun's power. It's still a land. And landfall on this guy is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. So
What's landfall?
landfall is basically something happens as soon as you play a land. So, and then it always just tells you what happens when you play a land. Something awesome happens.
Keyword.
Yeah.
Cool. So the deck breakdown for this deck, if you're wondering about color curve, what types of creatures are in here, we have the color breakdown is mostly green. We have 9 multicolor, 15 white, 32 greens, and one itsy bitsy little red card. Now there are in the multicolor some red, that's where most of the red comes in, but only one little itsy bitsy red card, which is kind of funny. So that's the color breakdown. As far as creature types and types of cards, there are 37 land in this deck. Creatures, you're looking at 33, sorceries 10, instants 9, enchantments 9, and artifacts 3. So
Not very many.
that's not very many. When you're looking at the mana curve of this deck, it is a pretty high mana curve. So 37 lands, you only have 2 at 1. Those are kind of like your mana dorks, your soul ring is in there. You have 6 at 2 mana cost, 16 at 3 mana cost, and 12 at 4 mana cost. And there are also cards higher than that as well. So most of your stuff is 3 and up. 3 is not bad for a mana curve, but you have some pretty big, beefy creatures. However, you have lots of land in this deck, so you should be able to get them out fairly quickly. There's lots and lots and lots of ramp. So we'll see. We think that this deck is going to run pretty fun. What about our evaluation? So we're going to go into the cards now, and we're going to tell you why we think this deck is good, or if we think this deck is good. What do we base that on?
Well, we have a little formula that we use for evaluating commander decks and figuring out what we need and such. So because it's kind of, you need lots of key pieces to make your deck work. So our little formula has ramp. We need 15 of the 99 for that. Well, 100, I guess, because we're going to include the commander. Removal is 15 as well, because you need lots of removal, board wipes and targeted removal. And card draw, we need about 13, because again, we need to get going. High impact creatures, which are creatures that are going to win you the game. 12 for sure. And then the other on theme kinds of cards, or other sort of win conditions, other cards that support your main dudes, that's about 10 of those, and land generally about 32. So that's kind of what formula we use when we're evaluating commander decks for sure.
All right.
So, yeah.
Well, let's dive in. We're going to talk about ramp first. So as Shauna was just saying, our formula is we want to see about 15 ramp cards. In this deck, we see about 17 ramp cards. We think that's okay because you're going to want land in your hand. You're going to want to be able to play it. You're going to want to go quick with your big creatures. So the first one is Spring Bloom Druid. It is a 1/1 for 2 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice a land, and if you do, you can search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. So again, as you'll see as we're going through, there's a lot of landfall in this, so you want to make sure that you're playing this card when you have something on the battlefield that takes advantage of that.
Sure.
I mean, if you have it in your opening hand, it's a valid just kind of ramp card. But later on, it's okay to get those 2 ramp or those 2 extra lands and buff something up.
And we're going to show you some cards that is going to allow you to bring back those lands because you're sacrificing them, and again, just to continue with that landfall thing later on in the game. Roiling Regrowth is another example of this. So it's an instant though for 2 in the green, and sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So you could potentially have 3 landfall triggers for that turn. That would be really awesome.
It'd be really awesome.
Yeah.
Yavimaya Elder for 1 and 2 green is a little 2/1, and when it dies, you can search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. You're going to get him out early. You don't care if he dies because you're going to go get some more land, and they're not going to want him to die because they don't want you to have more land. You can also sacrifice him to draw a card, so he has that a little bit of an additional benefit that he fits also in the card draw category where there was less in this deck. So.
Scare Tiller, speaking of those cards that can get stuff back, so it is a 1/4 for 4 little scarecrow, and whenever it becomes tapped, choose one. So you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, or you can return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's going to be a little tricky to get him to tap. You're going to have to swing with him in general with this guy, but he's got a 4 toughness, so he's going to stay alive.
Staying alive. So Calni Heart Expedition for 2 is an enchantment. Now here's our first enchantment that has landfall. It's going to stay on the battlefield, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a quest counter on this card, and then you can remove 3 quest counters from it and sacrifice it to search your library for 2 basic land cards. So you put them onto the battlefield tab, then shuffle your library. It's just like a nice little same as those other ones where you're searching for 2, but you're just going to put it on the battlefield, and a couple turns later, when you've got your landfall stuff set up, then you can search for 2 more basic lands.
The core Cartographer is a 2/2 for 3 and a white, a creature. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a plains card to put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So just a creature getting you some land.
Plain specific. Beanstalk Giant is a wonderful little card from Throne of Eldraine. I love this card. So this is a card that has an adventure on it. So, because some of you may not have played with the adventures yet, I'll explain what that means. If you look at this card, you can see that it has 2 sides of a page. There's a little book at the bottom. You can choose to play it for its adventure cost and do the left side, which is search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library, or you can choose to play it for the right side, which is the Beanstalk Giant, and Beanstalk Giant's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. The benefit of this card, though, is if you play it for its adventure card, basically you put it off to the side in a little adventure zone, and you can then play the creature after. If you choose to play the creature first, you lose that sorcery and you don't get a chance to play it again. So in this case, you're going to probably want to use it for its sorcery before you play it as a creature, unless you know there's no more basic lands left in my deck. I'm just going to play this really big, what is there, 37 lands in this? I'm going to play this really big 37 because probably all of your lands are on the battlefield.
just a little correction there. The land that you go and get with the search isn't tapped. So
Oh,
that's
yes.
kind of nice
Thanks.
with this one. Elvish Rejuvenator for 2 and a green. It's a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's been a staple for a little while, that one.
Yeah, another little staple card for Green Commander is Fertility. It enters the battlefield with 2 counters. You can remove a counter from it, and you can go search your library for a basic land card. So nice little go search.
Yep. Satyr Wayfinder for 1 and a green, a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them into your hand. Sorry, put the rest into your graveyard. So it's a little bit scary putting that stuff in the graveyard, but hopefully you've got ways to get it back.
Yeah, hopefully. Niece's Renewal is a sorcery card. Search your library for 3 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then
Sweet.
shuffle your library. You also gain 7 life. So, hey, they're targeting you because you're a Lands Matter deck, and so you're going to gain 7 life and kind of reset.
Yeah. Circuitous Root. Did I say that correctly? I
Yep.
don't know. It's for 3 and a green.
Circuitous.
It's a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gate cards. So that's kind of nice if you've run out of basics. You can go get those couple gates that we have in here. Put them onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle your library. So that's handy.
So much ramp. Another rampy card. Far Wandering Sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This card has threshold. So if 7 or more, it's a keyword. Basically, you just do what's on the card. If 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, instead you search your library for 3 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So
Very nice.
timing wise, make sure you play this when you have at least 7 or more cards in your graveyard.
If you can, that's for sure.
If you can.
It's crazy. Kodama's Reach for 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards and put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Then shuffle your library.
Harrow. It's very harrowing. Not really.
pretty awesome.
As an additional cost to cast the spell, you have to sacrifice a land, but you get to search for 2. So this is another sack a land, search for 2. You replace your 1 land with 2, and hopefully you can get it back from the graveyard.
Then we've got finally an artifact that Arcane Signet. It's becoming a commander staple. It's for 2, and you can add 1 mana of any color in your commander's identity. So that's a really, really good mana fixing right there.
And then, of course, Soul Ring in every commander deck that's ever come out that Wizards has produced is a Soul Ring.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that. We like our Soul Rings. Now,
Hard
we
to
were
find
talking,
otherwise.
though, as far as ramp goes, because this has a lot of ramp in it. It does have probably more than a typical commander deck, which we're okay with because you need that. Because Soul Ring and Arcane Signet aren't land, and you have a lot of search for lands, if you do need to tweak this deck, those might be 2 things that you could say, I'm going to take those out in replacement by putting something like Crucible of Worlds or something.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
All right. Now we're getting into the removal section. This is a fun section where we're just going to get their stuff out of the way so our stuff can get in. So we have, the formula is 15. This deck has 14 as far as we're concerned.
great. Right on par.
And Admonition Angel is our first one. It's a 6/6 for 3 and 3 white. So a little tricky to play, but we have ways to go and get specific lands, right? It's a flyer for a 6/6 flyer for 6. And has landfall that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may exile target non-land permanent other than this angel. And when it leaves the battlefield, return all cards exiled with it to the battlefield under their owner's control. So you're using this to get their stuff out of the way. And then you're going to go to
It's
work with this one.
basically an Angel of Sanctuary where
Yeah.
it comes in and it exiles something until it leaves the battlefield. But every
But
time you
it's-
play a
every time
land,
you
that
play
happens.
lands, you can do this.
So silly.
So just tuck all their
It's
good
like
stuff underneath
evil
there.
laugh.
They have to get rid of it to
Angels.
get their
I love
stuff
angels.
back, right?
Angels are so awesome.
Oh my gosh.
So Banishing Light, it is a Theros card. It's a nice little exile card. When it costs 3, and when it enters the battlefield, you can exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. The nice thing about this is that not only does it do creatures, it also does enchantments, it does artifacts, it does planeswalkers. So in Commander, you definitely need something that does non-land permanents.
Then we have Living Twister for 2 red and a green, a 2/5 elemental. So there's one of our elementals. You can pay 1 and a red and discard a land card, and it deals 2 damage to any target. So there's a way to use up those lands you don't need, which I don't know what you're doing there, but anyway. Then you can pay green and return a tapped land you control to its owner's hand. So then you can replay it. The whole landfall thing again. So
Landfall.
it's going to do so much work for you, this little elemental.
And we have Acidic Slime, which is a nice little 2/2 Death Toucher for 5. What? Why? Because when Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, you get to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Land destruction.
Don't be mean.
Just don't. I never. So this is just personal preference, but I would always almost choose an artifact or an enchantment instead of someone's land, because there's nothing worse in a Commander game than being land locked. So.
Yes. Hour of Revelation for 3 and 3 white. Sorcery that costs 3 less to cast if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield. You're going to have a lot of stuff out there. Includes tokens. And you can destroy all non-land permanents. Goodbye, everything.
Beautiful card, too.
Yes.
Nikki B's horns in the back.
Nikki B.
Planier Outburst. Another destroy all non-land creatures. So, I'll point out that that's non-land creatures. A lot of cards in this deck turn your land into creatures. It will not destroy your land creatures. Just saying. It also has an Awaken cost, which is 5 and 3 white, which is a huge cost. But if you cast this spell, basically you get to put 4 1/1 counters on a target land you control. It becomes a 4/4 elemental with haste, and it's still a land. So you have all your other land elementals. You get another little 4/4 land elemental just by paying a little bit of the Awaken cost.
All their stuff is dead. But
Yeah.
yours isn't.
It's great.
Ground Assault for a red and a green. It deals damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control. I'm going to
That's
get rid of all your stuff.
Awesome. Treacherous Train, another one, same thing. Treacherous Train deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of lands player controls. So when we were talking about this, we were thinking endgame. This is very much a possible
Yeah.
kill everybody,
It's how much
finish
land
everyone
they
off.
have.
Right.
But still.
So punishing them for having lands, but it also has the benefit of basic land cycling. So you can pay 2, discard this land, search your library for a basic land, and reveal it and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library. So gets you a land as
Smacking
well.
them in the face. Condemn for 1 white. It's a little instant that put target attacking creature on the bottom of its owner's library. Its controller gains life equal to its toughness. So you have to pay something for being able to get rid of their best thing.
And then we don't want any of our opponents to have any contraband, so we're going to crush it up, crush that contraband. Any artifacts or enchantments that they might have, you might choose one or both of.
Or both.
Probably both.
Naya Charm for a red, green, and a white. You can choose one of these. So it deals 3 damage to target creature, or it returns a target card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. So there's a way to get back that land you need. Or a big creature. Tap all creatures target player controls is its 3rd option. So getting in there for the final hit is good too. So it's an instant.
And then this has exile up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments, which is great. It also has land cycling, so you can go search for land if you need to by drawing or by discarding this card. So it has options. We like options.
And here is the only
Only
red,
mono green or mono red.
Mono red card. It's a Geode Rager. It's a new card. For 4 and 2 red, it's a 4/3 first strike. And then its landfall is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, go to each creature target player controls. So that means until your next turn, those creatures attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you if able. So that's why we call that a removal, because you're getting their stuff to fight.
They have to attack with
them,
it.
Right? Not you. You're just sitting there watching them.
Watch them battle. Watch them kill each other.
Yeah.
It's great. And the last one in our removal section is Struggle to Survive. A nice little Hour of Devastation. We have Struggle. So in this case, you would choose which way you would like to play this. So Struggle is an instant.
You don't choose.
Oh, right. This is, you can play both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you. You play Struggle first, and you play it as an instant. It deals damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control. Then you're going to put this in into your graveyard, turned on its side, so that your little survive thing is sticking out, and you remember, oh yeah, I can play that. Later on, you can play the Survive, which is actually only 2. It has an aftermath, and each player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. Now, it does benefit them because they get it back as well, which is why it only costs 2. But remember, you sacrificed all those lands. You get them back, and you can draw them and search for them again. So it's great.
One thing to note on those kinds of cards too, that if you end up having to discard that card before you get to do the Struggle piece, you can still do the Survive piece.
Awesome, yeah.
If you want to.
If it's in your graveyard, you can do the aftermath.
That's why I know that.
Cool. Next section. What's next?
The next section is our card draw and tutors, where you want lots of card draw in this deck. But this deck, the formula is 13. There's 9 in this, but there's so much ramp and so much good stuff happening. We're a little worried about the amount of draw in here, but we've got some tweak ideas for that. So Armorcraft Judge for 3 and a green. It's a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So that could potentially be quite a few cards.
Yeah, make sure you play timing wise though, because you don't have any of your 1/1. So all your elementals that you put counters on, that's what this is going to trigger. So, Keeper of Fables is a 5 mana cost 4/5, and whenever one or more non-human creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, you can draw a card. So
that's
nice
one for each of them.
Yeah, every time each of them.
Sandstone Oracle for 7. It's a 4/4 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. If that player has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. So it doesn't have a lot of card draw, but the card draw that's in here, you can get a lot of cards.
Yeah, and then Harmonize is 4 mana cost sorcery. Yeah. You draw 3 cards, so nice to have that.
I like the new printing of it. It's very nice.
It's very nice.
Return of the Wild Speaker. Here's another one for 4 and a green, and choose 1. So draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. 15. What did we say that giant could be? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So you can also use it as that final blow to them. They're just going to kill them.
Yeah, so options. Inspiring Call, 2 and a green for an instant that draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until the end of turn. So not only do you get some card draw there, you also gain indestructible. It is an instant, so please play this during combat when you swing in, and you just are like, well, I might as well go for broke, and all of a sudden they've already wait till they block, and then give them indestructible.
Yeah. Seer Sundial for 4. It's a little artifact that has landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. And if you do, draw a card. So it's a good card draw all the time available to you there.
Yeah, and then they also put Abundance in this deck, which is a nice little enchantment for 4. And if you would draw a card, you may instead choose land or non-land and reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. Then you put that card into your hand and all the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So basically it's a card draw that you get to choose what you need at the moment. If you need a land, you're going to go get a land. If you need a creature, then or a non-land, you're going to get a non-land card.
And then we have Rites of Flourishing for 2 and a green, an enchantment that at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Each player may play an additional land on each of his or her turns. So you're helping them out too, but it just really is going to help you. And you have more of a benefit than they do, usually.
So not as much card draw as you would typically see in a commander deck for that. But there are some cards in the other sections that help you draw cards or do basic land cycling. So it may be okay. But if you are going to tweak, you might want to add some more card draw. High impact cards, these are the cards that are going to win you the game. They're going to do the most work for you, and they're going to be really powerful for your theme. The formula says you should have about 12. This deck has 12 that we saw anyways. Of course, these are all what our opinion of high impact cards are. So the first one we have is a Myria Angel for 2 and 2 white. You get a 3/3 with flying, which is awesome in and of itself, but it also has landfall, and when a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to create a little 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So every time you play a land, you get a bird.
Yeah, it's just going to be insane. Remember, some of those turns you're going to be playing 3 lands.
Yep.
Anyway, Myria Shepherd for 5 and 2 white. It's a 4/4 flyer, so a little expensive for the 4/4, but it has landfall as well. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If that land is a plains, when you play the land, you get you may return that non-land permanent card to the battlefield instead. So, yeah. Get your Sun Titan back out again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. Speaking of Sun Titan, that is in this deck as well, for 4 and 2 white. It is a 6/6 with vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return a target permanent card with converted mana cost of 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So there's not a lot of cards in this, creatures, for example, in this deck that have converted mana cost of 3 or less. There might be some artifacts. There's a few things. So you're kind of like, well, why would you have this? Isn't this better for like somebody that has a bunch of low to the ground creatures? No, because land is 0 mana cost. So we talked about how do you get your land back from the graveyard. This card gets your land back from the graveyard. That is what you would use it for. Yeah.
And it doesn't say it has to be tapped.
Doesn't
or anything.
have to be tapped or anything. So you just get your land back. Your landfall happens and triggers.
Crazy.
This
awesome
is a
card.
When you play this deck, I would definitely recommend going through each of your cards on each turn and saying, is there a trigger there? Is there a trigger there? Is there a trigger there? Because you will miss triggers.
Yep.
Anyways, next.
Enter the battlefields or attacks. Right? Like, this is so crazy. And it has vigilance. Now, this is a card that I love. I have it in my Lord Windgrace deck, which is another Lands Matter. Multani Yavamaya's Avatar for 4 and 2 green. It's a 0/0, but it has reach and trample. And it gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land in your graveyard.
So it's okay if they're in the graveyard.
It's totally fine. Reach and trample.
Yep.
And you can pay 1 and a green, return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand. So, return him from the graveyard to your hand. He never goes away. Once you've got him, he never goes away unless...
And in this one, it's okay to return land to your hand and play it again. You want to. So,
no problem there.
Multani was meant for this deck.
Yes.
Rampaging Baloth, 4 and 2 green for another 6/6, because who doesn't need another 6/6?
Yep.
With trample, nonetheless. It has landfall, and when a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So, land. Every land, you get a bird, and you get a 4/4 green beast. I love this deck.
Yeah. Oh. Omnath, Locus of Rage. This is one of Leslie's favorite creatures. He's a 5/5 for 3 and 2 red and 2 green. An elemental that has landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token onto the battlefield. Whenever it or another elemental you control dies, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So all those elementals,
if your lands are turned into elementals,
more damage to your face.
Yeah.
Damage to your face.
Yeah, they're not going to want to kill them. So now, wait, so we're put a land in, we're getting a 5/5 red green elemental creature token, a 4/4 beast, and a 1/1 bird. So far,
So far,
awesome. So now we have a Embodiment of Insight
Oh,
for
gosh.
4 and a green. It is a 4/4 vigilance. It says land creatures you control have vigilance. Yay! Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target land you control become a 3/3 elemental creature token with haste until the end of turn. It's still a land. So it is important to remember that this is only till the end of turn. It doesn't, your 3/3 elemental doesn't stay. But you don't have to worry about swinging with your elementals and losing them because you can bring them back from your graveyard.
And they have vigilance. It's not like you can't use them as land as well. You
Yeah.
can attack with it and then use it as a land.
Yep.
It's crazy. Marasa Root Grazer. This is a new little beast of some
love him.
sort. It's a 2/3 for a green and a white. So really cheap. It has vigilance. So this is from the new stuff. We both really love this little guy. You can tap him and you may put a basic land card from your hand onto the battlefield, or you can tap it and return target basic land you control to its owner's hand. So it's so good for this whole landfall thing. So you do that on their turn, like you block with him and then you tap it on their turn.
Which
right?
land should you return to your hand?
It has to be basic. Oh,
What?
what do you mean?
Should it be a tapped land?
Oh, yes. Yes, it should be a tap land that you've already,
Use your land
course.
first and then return it to your hand.
Yes, play it again if you need to.
Sorry, I threw that at her without asking.
What
She
are
was
you
like, what are you
talking
talking about? We talked about this yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
Abzan Falconer. I love this card. It is a 2/3 for 3, which you're like, so this isn't a high impact creature. It is! Why? Because each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it, which is all your lands, has flying. So now you have their vigilance and their flying. And it has Outlast. So you can pay 1 to tap and put a 1/1 counter on this creature. Outlast only as a sorcery. So basically you can make him bigger and bigger. It's great.
It's a crazy flyer.
Yep.
And all your other stuff with counters on it's going to be flyers too. It's just silly. Mina and Dan Wildborn. It's a 4/4 for 2, a red and a green, and you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Awesome. You can pay red and a green and return the land you control to its owner's hand. Target creature gains trample till end of turn. So let's get that big thing to run through them. Yeah, I can't even. I'm not even going to do the math.
Give something trample and get a land back in your hand. You know, the Mina and Dan, they look like they know how to party too. Like, I think I would love to hang out with them.
Yeah.
So Trove Warden for 2 and 2 white is a 3/4 cat beast. I love my little cats. I think every single one of my commander decks has a cat in it, so I'm very happy that this is a cat in this deck. Vigilance, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to exile target permanent card with converted mana cost of 3 or less from your graveyard. And then when it dies, you put each of these permanents exiled with it onto the battlefield under your control.
Of the cards owner.
Yeah, of the cards are my control. So this one here, again, you're like, well, why 3 or less? Again, mana, land, has 0 converted mana cost, so you're going to get those lands that you did have in your graveyard underneath this guy, and then you're just waiting for someone to kill him, because then all those lands will enter the battlefield and trigger all your stuff. This is a very triggering deck.
Triggers! Tuskguard Captain for 2 and a green. It's a 2/3. Again, why? But because it has Outlast of 1 green, and put a 1/1 counter on this creature. And each creature you control with a 1/1 counter has trample.
Now they have flying and trample.
So yeah, you're going to want that.
Did we say we love this deck? We love this deck. Okay, so now we're into the other cards on theme / win conditions / specialty cards. Our formula has, we think you should have about 10 kind of filler cards that fit with your deck. This deck happens to have 10. I think Wizards does a really good job with their formula. I wonder where we got it from. Sylvan Advocate is a 2 mana cost 2/3 with vigilance. As long as you control 6 or more lands, which you will, Sylvan Advocate and land creatures you control get +2/+2. So it buffs up your land, buffs himself up just for having lands. You're going to have lands because you're ramping like crazy.
Yep.
It's great.
Zendikar's Royal for 3 and 2 green, an enchantment. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 green elemental creature token. So there's some more tokens for you.
Token. Retreat to Khazad-dû. It is a enchantment that costs 3. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to choose one. You can either put a 1/1 counter on target creature, or you can gain 2 life. Depending on what you need, that's what you would decide. Because obviously with all this stuff going on, you might be a target. You might need some life.
This whole 1/1 counters thing, though. Remember that. Don't forget.
Yeah.
Retreat to Myria for 3 and a white. It's an enchantment that has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Put a 1/1 white core ally creature token onto the battlefield, or creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn.
Now you get a beast, you get an elemental, you get a bird, and you get a core ally.
Well, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I love this card, Mending of Dominaria. I have been playing this since Dominaria came out. You put 2 cards. So this is a Saga card. So how Sagas work is basically after your draw step, before you continue your turn, you add a lore counter. The very first time you play this, it starts with 1, and then the next time after your draw step, it's 2, and you do whatever the 2 says, and then the 3, and then it goes away. So on the first turn, and the second turn, you're gonna put a card from your library onto your 2 cards from your library into your graveyard, and then you get to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Doesn't matter if it was just put there or someone killed it ages ago, you're gonna get something back into your hand so you can play it again. That happens twice. And then at the very end, you get to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then shuffle your graveyard into your library. So any of the creatures and enchantments that you didn't get to put out or put back in your hand on your turn 3 are shuffled back in your library. This is an amazing card for this deck.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a bunch of land in your graveyard already.
Waker of the Wilds for 2 and 2 green. It's a 3/3 little merfolk shaman that lets you, for X and 2 green, put X 1/1 counters on target land you control. That land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature token with haste. It's still a land. So there again with those counters on the elemental lands, it's going to be flying, trample, +1/+1. I don't know. It's going to be crazy. crazy.
Elite Scale Guard for these are the filler cards, by the way. Elite Scale Guard for 4 and a white is a 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to bolster. Again, we're getting some 1/1 counters on things that hopefully have flying and trample. And when a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it attacks, you get to tap a target creature and defending player controls. So now your 1/1 counters give you some control.
If they're not dead by now, something's going wrong.
Then everyone's targeting you.
Yeah, exactly. Evolution Sage for 2 and a green, a 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. So make some more counters, why don't you?
What is proliferate?
It's basically you get to choose any permanents or players and add more counters to them. So it could be an infect counter, could be on the Saga, you could bump it up. Any counters. You get to make them 1 more.
Can you do theirs as well?
Yep, you can if you want. You might not want to.
Spore Mound for 3, well, if it's a minus counter though.
Oh yeah, if it's minus counter, you sure can, yeah.
Spore Mound for 3 and 2 green is a creature fungus for 3/3. That's a 3/3, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, now you're going to get a 1/1 green Saproline creature token. Yay, Spore Mound.
Oh, Lordy. And then we both start singing this song at the same time. For 2 white, together forever. Enchantment. And when it enters the battlefield, you support 2. So put more counters on. And you can pay 1, choose target creature with a counter on it. When that creature dies this turn, return that card to its owner's hand. Mm-hmm. You can do that at any time, as far as I can tell, at any moment. So yeah. You've got lots of land. You can use it to just let your stuff die.
Or if you're like, oh shoot, they're killing that thing I didn't think they would kill, and it happens to have a counter on it. So, yeah.
Protection.
So land, as we talked about, our formula recommends 32 land in any commander deck. It's usually between 32 and 35. We usually end up with about 32. This one has 37, which is definitely perfect, I think, for this deck because lands matter so much.
Yep.
So we're going to go quickly through the lands. The first one is Needle Spire. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can add a red or a white, but it has this little special ability that costs 2 and 2, or 2 and a red and a white, and it becomes a 2/1 red and white elemental creature token with double strike until the end of turn. It's also still a land. So it's a nice little land that has an upside ability that goes along with it.
Yeah, especially if you got those elemental buffing stuff going on.
And I'll let you do the next page.
Then we've got a few of these colorless manas that do other things. So Cryptic Caves, you can pay 1 and sacrifice it and draw a card. So there's that. Blighted Woodland, that one you can pay 3 and a green and you can sacrifice it, search for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield, which is really handy for Lands Matter. Naya Panorama, you can sacrifice it and look for mountain, forest, or plains. Myriad Landscape, same thing. You can go look for 2 basic land cards that share a land type and put them on the battlefield tapped, so that they really help with your landfall things.
Yeah, and then there's 3 more that have kind of tap and search. So our Evolving Wilds, that's typical. You just tap it and search for a basic land card. Terramorphic Expanse, you get to search for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield as well. And then Crows on Verge enters the battlefield tapped. You can use it for colorless, or you can pay 2 and search your library for a forest card and a plains card and put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So those are kind of our search lands.
Yeah, and there are ways that you can make those landfall things happen twice in a turn, even if you just have an Evolving Wilds, right?
Yeah, because the Evolving Wilds is a land, it enters, and then you're going to tap it, search for a land, and it enters. So
happens again. Then we've got the lands that tap for 2 mana. So Gruul Turf and is the red and green. Celestia Sanctuary is the green and white. Forest Garrison is the red and white. Those ones enter tapped. So when they enter, you return a land to its owner's hand. So they become 2 mana for sure, plus you're getting that landfall thing again because you're returning a mana.
Bounce lands are great for this deck.
Definitely.
So we also have some Guild Gates, Boros Guild Gate, Celestia Guild Gate, and Gruul Guild Gate. So same colors there. Those ones just enter the battlefield tapped. They're just basic staples, easy to find lands, so great for this deck.
Then we've got Jungle Shrine. It enters tapped and can be the red, green, or white. And then Command Tower. Of course, it's a staple, and it could be any mana from your commander's color identity. So same thing, red, green, or white.
What about basics?
Then we've got 7 plains, 4 mountains, and 10 forests because it is a green heavy deck.
So now the part you've all been super waiting for. Our recommendations for tweaks for this deck. So thank you very much. If you're not interested in our tweaks, you now know what the deck does, but if you want to stick around, we have some options for you. So the first section that we were kind of thinking of is about card draw. As we mentioned before, there's not a lot of card draw. Ultimately, when we were talking, this deck doesn't need a lot of tweaks. You can probably just play it as is, and it'll probably win you some games and be pretty crazy. But if you're playing and you're like, well, I don't really use this very much, these are things that you can maybe use. So Garruk's Uprising is an enchantment, and it enters the battlefield if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you get to draw a card. So that'll get you some card draw. Creatures you control have Trample, which is a great card for this deck because it doesn't matter if you have big creatures if they can't get through. So another way to give your cards Trample. I think there was only the one card and they had to have counters in order to have Trample. So this just gives all your creatures Trample. And then whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. So anytime you're putting something that's big onto the battlefield. Now if you turn your land into a 4/4 elemental, it does not enter the battlefield. It's already on the battlefield. So just so that you know, that doesn't count for that. But anytime you're entering your 6/6 whatever beast that you just put out or whatever, then it would trigger. There's a lot of big beefies.
Yeah, actually, because whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield,
Yeah.
so it can be those tokens too.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something from your hand. So, Guardian Project for 3 and a green, an enchantment. I just love this enchantment in all my commander decks. Plus, we love the podcast friends of ours who
Shout
are
out.
named Guardian Project. And anyway, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. It's commander. You only have one of each.
Yeah. It's a
Sweet.
nice little commander staple. And then Shaper Sanctuary for 1 is an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability that an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So punishing them, rewarding you for them targeting you.
Exactly. Then we've got some extra land, landfall type things so that you can play more lands per turn. The Arboreal Grazer is our first one there. It's just a little 0/3. If you can have that at the beginning of the game, that's awesome because he has reach, and when it enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So it's just
Extra
Extra.
land. Yeah.
Yeah.
Azusa, Lost But Seeking, you may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. So it's a 1/2, but not only are you now playing your regular land, you're playing 2 more lands. And if you played your Arboreal Grazer, you're playing 4 lands per turn.
Yep.
Landfall.
Dryad of the Elysian Grove. It's for 2 and a green, a 2/4, which is a very good body to have out there. And you may play an additional land on each of your turns. And lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. Such a great mana fixing dude.
Yeah. And then Wayward Swordtooth, a nice little dinosaur for 2 and 1. It's a 5/5. It has Ascend. So basically what Ascend is if you have 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing. Once you have City's Blessing, you have it for the rest of the game.
Yep.
And then you get the benefit of City's Blessing if you have any cards for City's Blessing, which we'll get to in a second. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, so it just gets you that extra land. And then this creature can't attack or block unless you have City's Blessing. So basically, until you have 10 things on the battlefield, he just kind of sits there, lets you play some additional land, but your land counts as a permanent. So if you're playing a bunch of extra lands, he's going to be able to attack and block quite quickly.
Very quickly. For 3. Animus Awakening, it's X and a green, a sorcery that reveal the top X cards of your library, put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. If you have Spell Mastery, if there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, untap those lands. So you might, because it's quite a few.
And then Ramanup Excavator for 2 and a green is a little 2/3, and you may play land cards. I keep saying land cards from your graveyard. I think this card is a must include in this deck, just because there is some ways of getting lands from your graveyard, but you want to have that option if you don't have a land in your hand and you need some landfall. I would even take out Arcane Signet and put this in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got a couple other landfall type cards in here. So Adventuring Gear for 1, it's a little artifact equipment that has landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and it's only equipped 1, so it's just a simple little way to buff up a dude, and it stays out there.
And it would be great if you could buff this little guy up. A Koam Hellkite for 4 and 2 red is a 4/4. Again, there's only 1 red. You got to give him a buddy. Dragon flying 4/4. He has a landfall, of course. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, a Koam Hellkite deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And if it's the land is a mountain, then it deals 2 damage to that creature or player instead. So if you're getting multiple lands out on the battlefield at a time, you could potentially take something out or just really damage their face and make this guy nice and big.
And I love the Avenger of Zendikar. It's an expensive card, but it's such a good card for 5 and 2 green. A big elemental that just got reprinted in Double Masters, and when it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each land you control. I've killed people with those plants. I love killing people with plants.
Love it.
Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 1/1 counter on each plant.
Did I say how much I love this deck?
I love this deck.
I just love it. So these are our tweaks, but we're excited about our tweaks.
Yeah.
But I'm still like, that needs to go in this deck. Balleth Woodcrasher for 4 and 2 green is a little 4/4, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, this little crasher guy gets +4/+4 and gains trample till the end of the turn. What now?
What if you put out 3 lands?
3 times 4 is +12/+12 with trample.
Trample.
What now? Oh.
Sorry, we get excited.
That's why you watch us. That's why you're still here.
Exactly. Eternity Vessel, it's a 6 mana cost artifact that enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it, where X is your life total. What? And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have your life total become the number of charge counters on Eternity Vessel.
Every time you play a land. Woo. So, I mean, first turn, you might, so let's say you're down, even if you're down to like 30 or something like that by turn 6, you play that, every time you play a land, back up to 30 life, back up to 30 life. They got to get rid of that. Or you're just going to stay.
Oh, I'm only at 1. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's actually 30.
Crash of Rhino Beetles is a 4
I love.
and a green, so 5 mana costs 5/5 with trample, and it gets +10 as long as you control 10 or more.
So it's a 15-15
lands.
when you
It's
play it.
ultimately a 15-15 at some point in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
With trample. In unison now. Oh my gosh.
Oh, jeez.
So, next section.
Other lands matter. So we just thought some other fun stuff to mess around with this deck would be really good if you brought them to put them in there and try it out.
Some of them are expensive.
Yeah.
You might, yeah.
So Nisa, who shakes the world, everybody loves to hate her. She's, for 3 and 2 green, 5 planeswalker. Whenever you tap a forest for mana, you get to add an additional forest. So there's this big ramp thing there, and you get to, for her +1, you put 3 1/1 counters on a land, and it becomes an elemental, so that whole elemental thing, it's still a land. And then you can -8, and you get an emblem that says lands you control have indestructible, so now suddenly your lands can't be killed. You get to search your library for any number of forest cards and put them on the battlefield tapped. They have to deal with her, otherwise your deck is
Because
going to be...
once you get your emblem,
yeah.
then you're golden. So
Yeah.
I really think this is a almost must include.
She's a game
if you
changer
can,
if you have it.
she's a game changer. She'll put your deck in a higher tier for sure.
Yeah.
Tomic Distinguished Advocate, for 2, he is a 2/3 with flying. Lands on the battlefield and land cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. Your opponents can't play land cards from their graveyards. So, a little bit of shenanigans if you're playing a mirror match.
And Crucible of Worlds for 3, it is a very expensive card, but it is really good. You may play land cards from your graveyard. It's an artifact that's always there. It's hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
Artifacts, so yeah.
This one was fun. We found this one when we were searching Architect of the Untamed for 2 and green. It's a 2/3. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get a little energy counter. Energy.
Yeah.
And then you can pay, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
Or 8. 8.
2, 4, 6, 8. 8 energy. So after you've played 8 lands, you get to create a 6/6 colorless beast creature token. So you're going to be playing lands. You might as well take advantage of getting energy and using them. So
I've used that card in my Lord Windgrace one. It's just a fun thing to add. So one of the other things we talked about is for the land, if you want to replace the guild gates with some shock lands, because they have they're called Plains Mountain or Mountain Plains or whatever. If you replace that, because then you'll have that whole trigger if it's a Plains thing going on. We were a little worried about the number of planes in this deck, so that might be something you might want to do.
The number of basic lands is definitely on curve as far as color goes. We didn't want to get rid of other basic lands to put more planes in. And there is only really one card that is like, if a planes enters, then this happens. But if you have the money or you have them anyway in other decks, you could use your shock lands.
Yeah. So that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching or listening to our little ditty about this awesomely fun Land's Wrath deck. We are available for your viewing or listening pleasure on Twitch, YouTube, podcasts, wherever you like to download those. Feel free to hang out with us on Facebook or Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear what you think of this deck, some of the other decks. What do you think of the new stuff that's coming out, Zendikar Rising. And that's it for this time. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime,
Tap those magic cards and have fun doing it.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.